Well, hey there, and welcome to episode number 37 of Metal Raps. My name is Mitch Joel, and as always, we are joined by Talking Metal's Mark Strigl. Mark, how's it going?
Good. Great to be back.
Yeah, and well, I was going to say one-on-one with Mitch Lafon, but now it's Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon, which we'll talk about in a second. Mitch, how are you?
Good, very well, and yeah, it's an exciting time.
Well, let's start with that. Rock Talk is a new show on the Jericho Network, Chris Jericho.
Right.
How did that come about? Where are you at? What's going on with this?
It's part of Podcast One as well. Simply put, Chris emailed me and said, "Hey, I'm looking for a rock show. Would you mind? Would you like to do it?" And I said, "Yeah, sure. It sounds good to me." And next thing you know, here I am on Podcast One with Chris Jericho on the Jericho Network. So yeah, it's very exciting. It's going to be I don't want to say the exact same show, but it's going to be interviews and rock news and rock stuff, just all things rock, basically.
So still long form interviews, or you're changing up the format? What are you going to do?
No, still long-form interviews. In fact, some of them might even go longer. The show, we need to put out an hour a week. So instead of doing 20-minute interviews, you might get half an hour to 40-minute interviews, and then some upcoming rock news. Like, hey, Scorpions and Megadeth are going on tour, and talk about that. So there's going to be a little bit of everything. Keep folks entertained.
I was going to say, I can let you talk about it on Rock Talk, but I think we need to talk about that specific topic right now. Am I the only one? I mean, I saw this bill announced, and you know how it is with the internet and how things go. Anybody can sort of pull together a GIF and make something look like it's something. And my first reaction, I literally had a bit of a laugh out loud. I was like, like somebody put this together. It's a bit crazy. And, digging not that much further deeper into it, Megadeth opening up for the Scorpions, I was really taken aback by this bill and the billing of this. Mark?
Yeah, listen, it's something that I would like to see. I think it sounds like fun, and two bands that I love. I guess the thing that I scratched my head about somewhat was the fact that they're doing arenas, it appears like. I mean, are these two bands that can fill arenas together?
I'm shrugging my shoulders. Mitch, do you have information we don't?
Well, listen, the Scorpions do well in a lot of the rock markets, stuff like Detroit, Madison Square Garden, Chicago. I'm sure it's going to be sold out. And some of the smaller markets probably will be a little tougher. But, look, they're coming to Montreal. They're not doing the Bell Center. They're doing the Place Bell, which I believe is only 5,000 or 6,000 people. So I think it's going to be one of those somewhere between 6,000.
But that show in Montreal doesn't have Megadeth.
Not announced, but all indications is that there will be Megadeth on that. But even then, the point still being that the Scorpions are probably going to be a 7,500 draw in most markets, with the exception of Madison Square Garden, which will probably be sold out. So I think it'll do well. Okay.
Yeah, I disagree.
Yeah, so
Mark,
when my friend,
I'm always a skeptic. So you do it now.
Yeah, I mean, my friend told me is like the Scorps and Megadeth are playing MSG, and there's basically two MSGs. There's the Madison Square Garden Arena, and there's the Madison Square Garden Theater. And I said, oh, cool. Well, they're playing the theater, which holds, I don't know, like 4,000 to 5,000. And he was like, no, they're playing the arena. And I honestly, I just saw Megadeth in Newark. Amazing show, great night, Metal Church, Amon Amarth, Suicidal Tendencies, Megadeth. But I can tell you, they the day like a week before, they started giving tickets away to the show, just to anybody basically who wanted them. You could, just as being somebody who had bought tickets through Ticketmaster in the past, you could get free Megadeth tickets to the Newark show, and we're talking 12 miles from Madison Square Garden, and the place, there was it was so poorly attended. Great show. I hate to be a bummer, because the show was fantastic, but it was so poorly attended that I can't imagine that the Scorpions and Megadeth, who both in this area, the Northeast, New Jersey, New York area has struggled with ticket sales, are going to be able to come anywhere close to filling Madison Square Garden. I mean, we'll see.
But the last time Barclays Center a couple of years ago was full. You know.
But there's two things going on here that I want to scratch just a little bit deeper underneath the surface with, because I think it sort of bears a bit of a conversation. When it was announced and whether or not they'll fill the Madison Square Gardens or not, I think there's sort of two tracks in my brain that I was going to. Track number one was, have we hit an inflection point with a lot of these bands from the 70s and 80s where it's all just classic rock, and it's sort of one of those things where you can all go out together and it doesn't even matter anymore, and it's all sort of morphed into one, whatever. Because I think that, when you talk about the sort of parallels of bands, you can go, look, Scorpions had their heavier moments, Megadeth had their lighter moments, but still in reality, we're talking about thrash with like hair/hard rock. It's sort of really coming together in a way where, I mean, if it took me aback, I can't imagine it didn't take others aback. And or are we heading to a place where the market for rock music or heavier music has sophisticated a little bit to the point where it's almost like Europe now, and we're getting these really obscure combinations coming up? And to me, that's where my head was more at, is like, is this just one of those things where it could be, Toto, Journey, Foreigner, like whoever, anybody who sort of played in that time zone can play together now and tour forever, or Night Ranger, whoever? Or is it that the taste of the consumer is more like, I liked both of them when I was young. It's and it is that sort of like European vibe. Mitch, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I really think it is. I mean, I'm just looking at my Facebook for when I post stuff about Megadeth and I post stuff about the Scorpions, and then I go with Duran Duran, and it's the same people that comment. So there seems to be this commonality of as you grew up through the 80s. In the 80s, and you liked Megadeth, you hated Duran Duran, and you hated. But I think we're just sort of all getting to that point where it's like, yeah, this was all cool, and I don't mind going to a bill with both bands now. And quite frankly, I think it's up to the bands to temper their set list. Scorpions probably need to, on this tour, add a few extra rockers and knock off some of the ballads. And I think Megadeth needs to get away from some of the thrashier stuff and go to more of the sort of 90s stuff. And I think, fans just love music. I really don't think the genre thing applies to us, especially as we're getting older and older and older. It's just like, oh man, I remember those days. And I think that's where we are right now, where we're just all remembering those days.
Do you agree though? I'm not sure if I agree with that.
Yeah, I disagree with kind of the whole concept. I mean, the first time Megadeth ever toured in my area when I was a kid was with Alice, opening for Alice Cooper. I mean, so it's like I mean, Scorpions and Megadeth, they were all these bands, were in Hit Parader and Rip and Metal Edge together. Toto wasn't, but so to see Megadeth touring with Toto, that would freak me out a little. That would be weird.
I meant more like just the way they're lumping the bands in, right? You know what I mean? It's more like the sort of packaging where they just package any band from the era together and say go.
Yeah, well, I think both bands fall under that metal, hard rock umbrella of 80s bands. I think the fan base is definitely there. But yeah, as far as package deals go, I think both of these bands have struggled on their own I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I need to go back and see what the Scorpions did on the last tour, but it just seems like they've struggled a little bit, and I think they'll both help each other. I don't know how much how many tickets.
And all of this is happening in a world where literally I walked by an H&M store and saw them selling Slayer and GNR T-shirts and thought, well, here we go.
Yeah.
So maybe this.
Yeah, and by the way, the bands have played together before. Huh? Let's not forget that over the last 15 years, they've been on festival dates together. They've been at unique events together. It's not the first time they share a stage. It's
just more like when you hear Scorpions, you think we're going to see sort of a Tesla, Def Leppard type of thing versus, and if you hear Megadeth, I feel more inclined to think of a Sepultura, Anthrax. That it just, look, maybe it's just me and it just threw me for a loop. But listen, Megadeth, one of the big four. Let's talk about number one of the big four to sort of shift away from that, which is Metallica. Now, this is a sort of piece of news that flew directly under my radar until, Mark, you had sent a text about this, and then it sort of like lit up my own sort of operator light board of feelings for this, because the band's album came out, did exceptionally well. The tour was announced. I'm sure it's going to do nothing but sell out and be absolutely incredible. Huge fan of the band. Can't wait to see it. Going to try and do multiple dates here. And then the album jetted back up to number 2 on the Billboard charts. And again, it just didn't even come across my radar as sort of raising any sort of alert. And then, Mark, pick up the story and tell us what's going on with this.
Well, basically, anyone who bought, at least I believe it's anyone who bought a ticket to see Metallica on this tour, ended up getting a copy of the new record, which I'm holding right here, an unopened copy. It's hardwired to self-destruct, and so I bought 2 tickets, one for myself, one for my wife. And when I bought those tickets, I had no clue that I was also paying for two CD copies of the 2 CD set, because it's there's 2 CDs, so technically 4 CDs of the latest Metallica record, and they're sent to me, and this is and everyone else who bought a ticket for this tour, which I cannot wait to see. It's going to be amazing. But basically, I even have a CD player in my house anymore. Whenever I need to hook up a CD player, I have to go get a USB CD player and plug it into my Mac, because MacBooks don't have CD players anymore. We don't have a CD player anywhere in our house. The only place I have one is in one of our cars. So it's just like I didn't want this, So to me, this is this whole thing of them popping back up on number 2. They sent my household two CD sets, so 4 CDs total, which I'm sure they count it, double, because that's how they do it. But it's just like, this is, to me, is absolutely ridiculous that they have a number 2 record for basically giving their CD away to some people who don't even want it. And I swear to God, I took both copies down to the local used CD store, and they wouldn't take it from me. They did not want it. They're worthless.
Well, what really did it for me is as a guy who's published 2 books, and as an author, you always strive to make Wall Street Journal, New York Times bestsellers. It is so complex to make that list. It really is driven by a whole bunch of very strange dynamics, and people have tried to game the system over time. In fact, my first book that came out in 2009. American Express came in and bought like 20,000+ copies to give to all of their small business open card members. And we thought, well, that's going to be an immediate bestseller. Turns out, no, it doesn't count if it's a bulk buy or done in a specific way, even though copies were purchased and sent to actual individuals. And then, so when I hear this, just from a sort of pure ethical standpoint, I'm like, what's the story here? And look, some people will make the argument that Billboard lost its relevance long ago. We're into the era of streams. We're into the era of downloads. And listen, if anyone understands that world, I get it. It's the world I live and breathe. It's where I spend the vast majority of my time. But I agree with you. I find it completely insane that what is basically a promotional initiative, because it's not like you're paying more for the ticket. You're paying for the ticket and they're giving you a CD. And I don't know what sort of back channel deal is being done with the record label, or I don't know who, or retailers.
I mean, imagine if Taylor Swift decided she was going to give away a copy of Mark Strigl's band with anybody who bought a ticket to her next tour. I'd have the number 1 record in the country. I mean, it's
without
that,
blinking.
It's absolutely. I think it's absolutely crazy. I feel bad for whoever was number 3 that week.
But is this a thing again? Mitch, I know you have some thoughts on this, because we've seen certain bands come up. One of them is definitely Bon Jovi, have number 1 albums, and sort of people look at each other like, how did that happen? Is this all tied into that? Where is this how bands have number 1 albums now?
Well, it certainly seems to be that way. It's interesting because it's been going back since about 2003, 2004. I mean, Prince has done it. Journey has done it. John Mayer has done it. It's just another way to advance declining album sales. Why not? I think it's perfectly fine.
Well, no, I don't have a problem, by the way, with there being a smart promotion where you buy a ticket to a show, you get a CD, you buy a CD, you get a ticket to the show. I have a problem where we're taking that package and splitting it up and saying, number one in terms of box office ticket sales and number one in terms of albums, when you have a situation where a hardcore fan like Mark or myself who's like, okay, a free CD, like whatever, send it to me. But suddenly that's counting as if I went out and bought it as a sale. I don't know. I have an issue with it.
And I already bought it. I bought the download. I bought the download the week it came out. So it's just like, I don't know. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and let's not forget also how they count stuff. If it's a double album, it's counted as 2 sales.
Right.
And same goes. Kissology, for example, was a 4 DVD set. Well, every one sold counted for 4. So
yeah,
they
that
sold
goes way back to the early
250,000.
80s. Yeah.
Yeah, and they were like, it's a million seller, and it's like, well, you actually only sold 250,000, but okay.
I look as a professional author in my sort of day job, I can honestly say that hearing this and seeing this, to me, one, it's infuriating, and two is even if I were the artist, I would not want this. I just don't feel like it's really authentic to me. It doesn't feel right. If you want to say, the tour sold out in 20 minutes and this and that, and this is our gate, and we did all this, fantastic. But you sort of dump in this album as a promotional thing and say, and now we have the number one album. I just, again, I think for an album to be counted as a sale, whether it's 4, 8, 10, or 1 CDs, it's every time someone purchases it, it's counted as 1.
Yeah.
And that's it. Everything else is promotion.
True, but it's never been that way. And even ticket sales,
when SoundScan was that way. I mean, originally SoundScan was that.
Yeah, sort of, but it hasn't really been that way in the last 20 years. And yeah, and even ticket sales. How many times do you see a show that says sold out, and then the day of the show or a week before, it's like, we've got tons of tickets? I mean, counting in the music business has always been very much of a smokescreen and
ambiguous.
Yeah, and it'll never change. I mean, the shows get papered, and for people who don't know what it means to have a show papered, is that they give tickets away, and so you'll see whatever. I don't want to name bands, but it'll say sold out.
But Mitch,
that's why they brought SoundScan.
But that also comes out in the wash when you see the gross revenue of the show, and also people know when you see attendance numbers. You can sort of tell when it's struggling or it's been papered. What I'm saying is that this tour did exceptionally well. This is an amazing band. There's no doubt about it. But to sort of grab this other mantle and put your pump your fist in the air, we're number one. I just feel is super inauthentic. You're right. The system is totally messed up and needs to be reviewed. But this is a blatant, obvious one to me, at least. Like when. I just couldn't wrap my head around it.
Yeah, well, it's good marketing. Good for Metallica. It makes it look
like I said, great promotion. Great promotions, just not necessarily albums sold or valid for that type of list. Before we wrap up, there is one person that I'd love to talk about, and it was really triggered by you, Mark, because I know you went to catch the Last in Line show, which is very much Vivian Campbell, Dio's one of the original guitarists for Dio, who's gone on to be part of Def Leppard. People love him there. I'm just a massive River Dogs fan, so I know Viv is coming out with the new River Dogs album, which is great. Recently saw some news that his health has also been really good, which is great because he's had some real battles of his own. But I'd love to hear, a little bit about that show, because I know people are super excited about it. And yeah.
I got to tell you, after I just saw them 2 nights ago, Friday night, and after seeing them, I just wish all you listeners could get a chance to see them, and you probably can't because they're not going to a lot of places. But if they do happen to be in your area, definitely go check them out. This was in a small club, and Vivian looked great. He's definitely, seemed... His hair has grown back in. He's got even a little gut on him. He was on stage drinking beer all night. And my wife pointed out that we've seen him so many times with Def Leppard, and he's always great and puts on a wonderful show. But at this show, the smile on his face never left. He was so authentically happy and just pleased to be there, probably losing money, playing a small club and, having to pay this band and financing this, I'm sure. But he just looked like he was having the time of his life, and they played these old Dio songs mixed with the Last in Line songs, more leaning towards Dio than the Last in Line, just so well. And I was so impressed with Andrew Freeman, who just lit
Great
up the
singer.
stage. Yeah, not only a great singer, and I liked his voice on the record, but I don't know, maybe it was I was looking for someone to sound more like Dio or something, but I loved his voice live, and thank God he wasn't a Dio clone, because I think that would have cheapened the whole thing, to be honest. And he just such a presence on the stage, and just filled the room with not only his really spot on voice as far as pitch goes and delivering the notes, but just personality and attitude. This guy is such a pro, and hats off to Andrew Freeman. So good. If you can see this band Last in Line, go see them. One of my favorite shows so far, this year, which,
Andrew's done quite a bit. Like I believe he had a small stint in the Offspring. He's been a bunch of other bands, but I've actually seen him many times in Las Vegas because he was in Lynch Mob. That's right. Because he's one of the main guys in that Raiding the Rock Vault, which is a fan. If you love music, it's just a fantastic show where they do a ton of covers. It's a bunch of the sort of players from the 80s and 90s, and just a hoot. And Andrew just kills on all different types of songs. So it's amazing to see. Did they do songs past Last in Line, or
no?
Is it
they
up
didn't.
Until...
They didn't. Okay. I think they may have played at some earlier shows. They may have played a one or two songs off of Sacred Heart. I'm not positive about that. At the show I saw, they did not. They played songs strictly off of the first two Dio records and the new Last in Line Heavy Crown record. I think they did maybe 4 songs off of Heavy Crown, and everything else was Dio, and it was just all the songs you'd want to hear, Last in Line, Evil Eyes, Invisible, Don't Talk to Strangers, Holy Diver, We Rock, Stand Up and Shout, you got them all. It was just a wonderful night, and one thing Andrew made a point of really reminding people that, the reason those first 2 or 3 Dio records are just held up as such classics, especially Holy Diver and Last in Line, is because of Ronnie James Dio, but also because of the band that played with him on those records, and their personality and songwriting skills and attitude was injected and a part of those 2 timeless records. Let's say Last in Line and Holy Diver. And they have every right to be playing those songs live. And, he really called out the haters online. And at one point he was like, these guys made this music. And even Vinny Appice came out from behind the drums and told stories about them writing Last in Line and where they wrote it. And they were all smoking weed when they wrote it. And, he shared that, and they really were reclaiming these songs as their songs. And they also are, Ronnie's songs and Jimmy Bain's songs, and a nice tribute to Jimmy Bain. It was not only just a fun night. Emotionally, for me as a Dio fan since age 14, it was emotionally heavy night. I really enjoyed it. At one point, he's like, "And if you don't like what we're doing here, you can go see some other people play with a hologram," which I thought was kind of funny.
Jesus. Yeah, it's funny. I'm actually sitting here holding in my hands one of my favorite CDs, and I haven't kept many from back in the day, and I gave away tens of thousands of them, which is Vivian Campbell, River Dogs. Right. It's not the famed self-titled debut that came out on Epic Records, but it's this thing called On Air. And what they had done to promote that amazing album in the mid-90s, I think it was, or early 90s, is they went around to all these different radio stations playing whatever the hit was. I think it was Toy Soldier was probably the big hit from that album, or I Believe maybe. And what they did is they often played 2 or 3 songs, and they basically recreated the album fully acoustic. Wow. And it's called River Dogs On Air. It's extremely rare. I don't even have the front cover of it, but I'm holding it here in my hands thinking I got to rip this and try and get a copy of it. Amazing 12 songs, literally the debut album, but just all acoustic, with a huge shout out to Rob Lamotte, who's an amazing singer and guitarist on this album with Viv. Just great band. And again, I don't know. I think it's Frontiers, but they are coming out with a new record also this year, new River Dogs album. So that should be cool too. Super psyched about that. Before we get going, let's talk about some music that we've been checking out lately. I will move it over to you, Mitch Lafon. What have you been listening to?
Boy, a bunch of stuff. I don't even know if I can bring it down to one, but Black Star Riders, Heavy Fire, Night Ranger, Don't Let Up, which is absolutely fantastic. the new Thunder, which the name escapes me, but the new Eclipse Momentum. There's just a lot of great releases coming out. I mean, just one after the other. Frontier Records and all these bands are just throwing great album after great album. And, of course, my Thunder playlist, which I can never get enough of. Yeah, a lot of great stuff. The Night Ranger, Don't Let Up. That is worth checking out.
Oh, I love them. I haven't checked it out yet. I will. Mark, what have you been checking out?
Well, some of the true fathers of thrash metal are still out there doing it, and they have some great new music out. For one, Overkill, The Grinding Wheel is just a great listen. One of my favorite Overkill records of the past decade, for sure. If not, I'll say my favorite Overkill record. And that says a lot, because they've put out some great stuff. Ironbound was great. But The Grinding Wheel by Overkill is just awesome. Creator is back with a new record, Gods of Violence. Every song just kicks ass. It's so good. It's so good. And another quick one. I know nothing about this band. I don't even know how to pronounce them or their name. But Junius, Junius, Eternal Rights for the Accreation of Light. Again, I don't know anything about these guys, but they're good. It's like kind of a gothic metal, Tool meets Perfect Circle, but also some more traditional metal sounds mixed in there. It's great stuff.
Good. Yeah, a couple of things I've been checking out. I've heard some snippets and clips from the upcoming Warren album, Louder, Harder, Faster, sounding very, very good. As Mitch Lafon knows, I'm quite buddy with the new singer Rob Mason. I've always been a fan of his, also of Lynch Mob and Cry of Love. And Mitch did Mitch reintroduced the Lovers. It's been great, and I can't thank him for reconnecting us. We hadn't spoken in many, many years, but it sounds really great, and I think it complements the band's sound, the classic sound, with sort of something a bit newish and freshish. And they've teamed up with PBR, Professional Bull Riding Association. There should be some sort of fun stuff coming out of that. House of Lords. So yeah, I mean, this whole Frontiers thing, there just seems to be a whole bunch of stuff coming out. I've been listening to Saints of the Lost Souls. I've always liked this band. They're one of those bands that I don't sort of go cuckoo crazy over, but I'm eager to hear new stuff. And I've always been a fan of James Christian's voice, and so I'm just always all in when something like that comes out. And then the one that sort of surprised me that I didn't think I'd listen to more than once, and Mark, I'm surprised you didn't mention this, is the 30th anniversary of Turbo by Judas Priest. I really thought I'd listen to it and go, it's funny, like I don't remember it being a great record. I remember liking a couple songs and being like, okay, I'm not so sure. It was more electronic. They got a bit weird at that phase, but this 30th anniversary remastered version, just, I don't know, there was way more songs than I thought that I'd like, that I really do like on that album. So
I like every song on that record. I always thought that record got a lot of heat because sure, there were keyboards, but if you compare it to like Point of Entry, it's really not that much less heavy. I mean, it's like a little more keyboards than Point of Entry, but it's they glammed it up. They dyed their hair a little more. They put away the leather for a year or two there, and they kind of glammed it up a bit. So I think that was one of the things that really kind of hurt the record. It was probably meant to help the record at the time, but in the history books, I think a lot of people didn't give it a chance because of that. I love Turbo by Judas Priest in my top 5 Judas Priest records for sure.
Yeah, and so for me too, it's sort of just like I guess you're right in this sort of thread. If you look back, sounds a lot better than the moment in time where you're like, what are they doing? They're just jumping on the bandwagon. And I think you're right. That was sort of the taste I probably had in my mouth back then when Turbo was first released, again close to 30 years ago. But just a hoot to listen to, and really well done on the packaging. So it's been great. Awesome time catching up with you guys. Talking metal, Mark, let us know, one, obviously where we can find the show, and two, what's been going on.
We have a new episode that just came out, which is co-hosted by Joey Haney of the Rock Strikes 10 podcast, which is a great podcast if you haven't heard it. And he and I talk about our favorite new music from 2017 so far. So if you're looking for new music, it's definitely an episode to check out. We had Brad Gillis on recently. told a lot of great stories about being an Aussie and working with Dio on the hearing aid project. So definitely check that out if you haven't heard it. And talkingmetal.com, of course.
Yeah, and now we've got Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon on the Jericho Network. And I know, Mitch, just following you on Facebook, you've done a ton of conversations, but let people know, one, where they can find this new show, and two, what you're excited about that's coming out soon.
Well, you can find it over at podcast1.com and, of course, the Podcast One app, and it's also on iTunes. The first show is or was with the Police and Paul Dean from Loverboy, and I love that chat with Paul Dean. And then I've got some Brad Gillis coming up, some Ricky Rocket, David Ellefson of Megadeth, just Bernie Tormé talking about his days on the bus with Ozzy and stuff. There's just some great content coming out, and I think people are going to be very, very pleased with the show. Just a lot of great stuff. It's all new and exciting. We're only at episode 1. Episode 2 comes out next week, so we'll see. Let's see what happens. Hopefully World Domination is next.
Love it. And you can always find me at Mitch Joel on Twitter, or check out my podcast, Groove, the No Treble podcast at notreble.com, where I'm slowly trying to build the largest oral history of electric bass players. It's not out yet, but coming out really soon. I've got a long and awesome conversation with Liam Wilson from the Dillinger Escape Plan, which is super interesting. Actually, this conversation took place prior to the crazy and very scary bus accident that they had, but also talking about the band and that they're sort of pending breakup as well. So check that thing out for sure.
Cool.
Well, that's been great. Great catching up with all of you guys, and we'll be back hopefully really soon with episode number 38 of Metal Raps. Until then, good night.